Hello YouTube, this is Morgan, Airspeed Prime here with my next Boruto Manga chapter review. This one's going to be for chapter 57, which is called Eida. So she gets the cover page for this chapter, and it's basically all about her. 3/4 of this chapter, 30 pages, are pretty much devoted only to Code talking to Eida and introducing us to her, and then the remaining 10 pages are like a few pages on the Kage Summit and a few pages of Naruto talking to Amado. You'd probably have to say that the Naruto talking to Amado stuff is like the most sort of efficient and sort of overall, I'd say, important section of the chapter, in terms of like it accomplishes the most with the least amount of page count. The Kage Summit, I did expect a little bit more from it. It was very much just a recap, and then the other Kage just kind of noting, like, Naruto, you're going to have to make some big decisions. I felt they missed out on a few opportunities to just further acknowledge that we're still coming off the end of the last arc, and so stuff like, say, Gaara not mentioning to Naruto that, oh, you've lost Kurama, or that not really being mentioned within the chapter, I thought was kind of weird. And to then not only kind of not have Gaara have that moment of connection with Naruto, but for Gaara to actually be the one to go kind of further than the other road and be like, can you do this to your own son? I just think they could have balanced that scene a little bit better. But again, the page count is a bit weird. I definitely think they could have accomplished the exact same amount of stuff that they did with the Code and Eida stuff while using about 10 less pages, or even 5 or so less pages that you could have devoted to something else. Because obviously the key thing in this chapter is that Boruto and Kawaki are both not in this chapter. They get talked about towards the end, and obviously again towards the start as well, but they're not in it, so we never actually find out what Boruto's training that he wants to do, which was the sort of teaser from last chapter, what that training is. I'm guessing that will be probably revealed in the next chapter, find out what training he is doing, as well as him making, I suppose, a decision based on something that happens in this chapter. But yeah, let's sort of get into it and just go through it sort of page by page here. I think that's the most effective way to do it. So we open up, and this opening scene here, it's 5 pages, is this is an example of just, I feel, you know, them taking a little bit too much time to just get into things. Like, you already showed us what Eida looked like pretty much at the end of the last chapter. And then this is just like Code further talking to himself about stuff that, you know, is roughly there from the previous chapter, and the basic thing here is just that Bug wants to warn him that actually you thinking you're just gonna talk to her is a bit naive. You don't know the scope of her abilities. Basically, I do. This is a mistake. And then he just basically smashes open the container that she's in, and we leave the tease of how this encounter is going to go until after the other scenes are done. Again, 5 pages to accomplish what really only needed to be maybe like 2, 3. So it's just not the most effective use of time, when again it's just 5 pages to basically just tease the character you wanted to meet straight away from the last chapter. We're going to just string that along a little bit more, unnecessarily in my opinion. Because again, you could have accomplished a lot of the same stuff of Bug warning Code in a much quicker fashion. He just walks over, tries to crack it open, he says that while it's happening, and you don't need the scene of him just talking to himself prior to this. But anyway, we'll move on from there, because again, there's nothing really to talk about in the opening scene is the main thing. So the 5 Kage Summit, as we expected, was going to be just done over sort of a video call. And that's exactly what happens here. So they gave the other Kage the information about Code and that he is the threat coming up. And, you know, there's a brief discussion here about the fact that all the transfer portals to get to Kara's base, which is in a different dimension, have been shut down by Code. So, sort of, for the most part, our hero characters have no way of getting at them. And also, Code doesn't really have any super easy way to get into the village. So we're in a little bit of a standoff here, which makes sense. And the chapter does overall further commit to the idea of Code probably isn't going to attack immediately the Leaf Village, which I think furthers the idea that, yeah, I'm guessing the time skip probably is coming up sooner than we think. But that's that. So, yeah, they just note that again. We think Code has two broad concerns. The first is retaliating against those involved in subduing Otsuki Ishiki. And the second is cultivating a divine tree from Ten Tails. And they're all kind of shocked about this. Like, oh, we'll have to fight the Ten Tails, like, again. So they really need to thwart his plan. It's brought up that, okay, can we trust Amado's information, which is what you're basing everything on? And Naruto says that he doesn't 100% trust Amado, but in the middle of a crazy situation fighting Ishiki, his information was extremely valuable in taking him down. So they all roughly tend to agree with Naruto on this, where like they're going to be still suspicious of Amado, but he's proven himself enough where they'll trust his information. Gaara then switches the point of the conversation to being more about Momoshiki's Kara and asks, is Boruto alright? And Naruto says, he's fine, but the situation that's happening to him isn't so fine. So Gaara says, if Momoshiki or Boruto himself were to become an Ishiki level threat, sorry to be harsh, but would you be able to take down your own son? And Naruto does answer after not much of a pause and says, I'll do what needs to be done as Hokage. And then we cut to the other scene of Naruto talking to Amado. So, like I said there, that's the Kage Summit. They had a pretty big panel in the last chapter saying, we're going to call a Gokage Summit and like really discuss some stuff. And it was, again, just, 5 or so pages of content. Pretty much just to be like, yeah, Code's the threat, and Momoshiki's the other threat, and they just basically discuss that. I suppose there's some value to the fact that they talk about the bases and how they do or do not have access to them, but the main takeaway is just Gaara asking this question of Naruto and him saying what he says about it. But it is weird that they don't discuss, like, for instance, Naruto not having Kurama anymore, or Sasuke not having the Rinnegan. Like, basically the two most powerful ninjas in the world, that the things that make Konoha the strongest of the nations, really brings them down. There's no talk about that, which I think is just a little bit odd. But maybe we'll come back to the Gokage Summit and cover some other stuff. They'll have another meeting, because it seems like they can just do them whenever now, which is good. So yeah, the Naruto Amado scene here, Amado does say, I spoke to Sasuke earlier, but it did seem like he was prepared if necessary. So I suppose, again, he already knows what it's like to sort of, face Boruto as he was. So this is just another example of that. And yeah, Naruto just says, I have trouble believing any of it, that my precious son will become another person entirely, a brutal Otsutsuki no less. So yeah, I'd rather keep on not believing it until the moment it happens. And this is where Amado's sort of almost out of nowhere just says, I used to have a daughter. I know how you feel. And Naruto's like, oh, I didn't know that. And he just says, she died though. It's been 12 years already. And it's just like, oh, I see. And this is when he brings out the special medicine that we're going to talk about. But this is an interesting point, because I think we've known about this to a degree for a while. Amado has a daughter, and like a lot of the speculation before this chapter, before getting introduced to Eida, was always that Delta is likely Amado's daughter. That's why there's a few scenes from previous chapters where he specifically kind of like looks at Delta when like Jigen mentions about like the wish of the car members sort of coming true. And stuff like that. But you could maybe make a case at the end of this chapter that maybe it's Eida. But the question really is just about, like, he says she died. It's been 12 years. So is he just talking about it from the perspective of, like, the way they've been transformed into a cyborg has basically made them not his daughter anymore, because they're obviously very different characters. They neither seem to treat Amado as if he is a father figure to them. So that's kind of an interesting one in terms of like Eida, as we see, should know if Amado is her father or not. Delta, it could be hidden from her, but what's the situation there? Um, I'm still perhaps leaning a little bit more towards Delta, just because it's maybe a little bit suspicious that they mention daughter in the same episode Eida is introduced, and I think they do enough with sort of Eida's motivation surrounding how she feels about Amado to where I don't think they have to include that personal connection in that dynamic. Whereas Delta, their dynamic isn't super clear, and the father-daughter thing could actually be kind of quite valuable. And I think it also makes a little bit more sense that like Delta has multiple bodies, suggesting that she actually did die and has had to just be restored in like a much more deeper way than any of the others who probably still are in their original body, just heavily modified. So she died maybe fits more for Delta, but we'll have to wait and see. So from there we get, like I said, the medicine. It's not that you don't want to believe, rather you don't want to give up. That's why you've come to me. So this is a drug that has the aim of weakening a Byakugan's power. And he basically explains that the origin of the Byakugan is with the Otsutsuki. It's this core ability that is essential to them. So I have this drug that weakens the Byakugan, thus it weakens Otsutsuki as well. He does specify stuff like it might have this effect. It's a risky drug, but he's suggesting it because he feels it works to some degree. And he feels that this might have the effect of curtailing the Otsutsukification of Boruto's cells. So it is noted here that the side effects would be decreased vision, and I suppose potentially blindness there, but also there's a risk that Boruto could die by constantly having to take this drug basically to mitigate the effects of the Otsutsukification. So he does note that this would only ever be a temporary fix that would only slow it down, but it is a solution to what's going on. And yeah, he's just giving it to Naruto here. It's Naruto's decision. It's Naruto's decision whether to bring this to Boruto or not. It's going to be Boruto's decision in the end if he wants to take it or not. So that's going to be interesting to see how that comes up, because Boruto, even though we don't see him in this chapter, is now placed with this decision. He can either take this medicine and it'll slow down the process and potentially give him more time, or he can work on Kawaki's suggestion and plan for what's going to happen. Now, I suppose those things don't have to be completely separate. He can, do one while doing the other, but it's all going to be about, like, I suppose, how bad are these side effects? Like, would they have brought up the nature of this drug and what it does if we weren't going to ever see what actually happens when it is used on someone? The other part of this, of course, is that we know Boruto has the Jogan, which isn't the Byakugan, but is like kind of established to be sort of like almost like an even better version of it to some degree. There's so much we don't know about that technique, and like might this drug like activate the Jogan in a deeper way? Because it feels like the answer to everything is the Jogan, but we're nowhere near like it actually being a factor just yet. But anyway, so Naruto takes it and just thanks Amado for this, and just says, come back if you need more of the drug, basically. Which is where we transition over to the full-on reveal of Eida as a character. So she walks out, we get a look at her character design here, which is pretty cool. Obviously after the rumors of this chapter came out, and like the suggestion of like what her powers are actually going to be, you kind of worried that like, oh no, are they going to like make this really like sexualized character, and that's going to be all she's about, with aspects of her character design and then also having an ability that everyone is obsessed with her. I think they handle it in a pretty good way to where her like personal motivation as a character is kind of rather sincere in terms of wanting to actually experience like true love, because her power sort of deprives her of ever knowing if anyone ever feels that way towards her. So I think that really helps to sort of fix any sort of potential kind of controversy surrounding this. But either way, she walks out, and Code is sort of prepared to take her out if she's going to potentially go a bit rogue on him. So he has his powers basically activated already. He puts the black strip around her, and then obviously he just pokes his claw through his own hand, but because of the space-time thing, it like comes out next to her head. But he can't bring himself to actually go ahead and like actually injure her. So he was planning to dispose of her as of Jigen's orders, but he can't. It says here, I can't move my hands, or rather, they won't do what I tell them to. And she just notes, like, see, you can't, can you? And he's like, oh, is this one of her abilities? And she just basically goes off, like, into the bathroom because she's more worried about, like, having bad breath and so on. So eventually it's the situation happens and everything calms down. Bug and Code get to talk before Eida comes back. And, yeah. So this is just, where Bug explains that, okay, you've gotten yourself ensnared in her spell already. And we obviously are beginning to get a sense for how her ability works. And he's like, yeah, my heart's pounding harder the longer I wait. Is this a tactic of hers too? It's her ability. She's stolen your heart. An ability to steal one's heart. It's the reason you weren't able to attack her earlier. And he's like, that's incredible. Clairvoyance is cheating enough. To have yet another ability, that's amazing. And this is where she comes back and says, overblown is what it is. It's not such a good thing. And she basically goes on to explain that her clairvoyance ability that they're talking about is not that she has the ability to see into the future. It's that basically she describes it as, since she was born, she is able to sort of witness any event that has happened. So from the present, she can look back on the past all the way up to effectively when she was born. And she can sort of witness stuff happening in the present as well. So it's a sort of limited omnipotence vision type thing. She describes it here as like, imagine there were security characters in every nook of the world and you could access them whenever you want. That's how it works. So she just says that she gets super bored most of the time, but she sees stuff that's interesting from time to time. And she notes that she saw Ishiki dying, and she knows basically why Code is here, that he was, before Ishiki went away, the last person he spoke to was Code, and that's why Code is here. So it's this confirmation that, like, she was sealed up in this thing. She wasn't in that scene. There's no way she could know about it except because she has this ability. So it's explained here that it's hard to explain, but it just feels like my consciousness has jumped there. I can see the past too, and that she can't see events that happened before she was born. She also just makes a joke about, and don't even joke about asking like how far into the past I can see. Basically, don't ask me my age. So yeah, it's not precognition. She can only see current events in real time, or pick scenes from the past to watch. So she predicted that he would come to see her, and she knows already what he wants to ask, because I suppose he probably talked about it at some point, and she saw that, and she knows that how to release the power limiters implanted on your body is what you want to know. And this is I didn't expect this to be sort of the main question that he wanted to ask her, because I felt like it was kind of this obvious thing of like, well, because he knows about his own power limiters, he surely has to know that it relates to Amado in some way. And so it's more of a technical point here that it's like it's a two-factor thing here. It's only Amado can lift the limiters using iris recognition and a voice print command code. Both biometric authentications are needed. She doesn't know what the word is, and you can't just use a jutsu to transform into Amado because he's used like scientific modifications on his eyes, and obviously transformation jutsu does not keep track of technical stuff like that. So basically you either need Amado with you or you need to take his actual eye out to make that work, and so on. So that immediately places the limit on the only way Code can get rid of the limiter is if he gets Amado. So then this is where you notice sort of the situation he's in. And this is kind of important for the future of the series, I suppose. So charging into Konoha alone just for this would be short-sighted. Not that I'm a fool like Delta. And Eida says, this must be why he hunkered down in a shinobi village. He's smart and a dreamy dandy, but I'll sure still kill him the next time we meet. So this is Code basically admitting that, okay, so what's not going to happen, I suppose, is that over the next few chapters, Code is just going to attack the village and we're going to have a kind of repeat almost of what Ishiki did. No, we're setting up for something kind of different here. And I'm guessing it's going to take the time skip for Code and Eida to work together to make something happen to where it's going to be feasible for them to actually get Amado out of the secure Konoha village. So that's that. And then if there's any like people thinking that like, oh, maybe Eida is Amado's daughter, it's kind of a bit weird that she calls Amado a dreamy dandy, but we'll have to see where that goes. So yeah, Code asks her then, so you hate Amado, why? And she actually asks him, do you know why? And he just says, because you remodeled your body. And she's just kind of like, it's half right. It's not the main reason. So Code's just like, I don't want to play this game anymore. Why? And she just asks him, Code, you like me, right? And so Code is just like, more guessing, okay. Yes, Eida, I like you. I've been crazy about you since earlier, but at the same time, my feelings for you raise a question. These emotions of mine, which seem so authentically real, are they phony, manufactured by your ability? And she just says, what trifling things you worry about. Does it really matter? Don't misunderstand. I'm not talking about myself. I just want to know your abilities since we'll be teaming up. You know nothing, Code. That's why you're useless. It's not limited to you. Everyone becomes captivated by me, both men and women, no matter who they are. Now do you get it? How absolutely boring and tedious it is. You're not the one who most wants to know whether your feelings are real or not. It's me. Even people who might have naturally, genuinely come to like me, I'll never know their true hearts because my ability forcibly steals their hearts away. So this is the right answer to my earlier question. Amado has robbed me of ordinary love. I can't forgive that. That's why I hate him. So that character motivation I actually really like for the character, because they're presenting this idea that this is actually a really interesting way to go with, I think, a lot of Kara members. If you want to really go into the idea of like, who were these people before they joined Kara and got augmented by Amado? How did this all happen? Who are these people? The heavy implication seems to be that Eida or Delta is his daughter, and so the augmentation saved her from full death, though he still considers that she died. And now you're seeing that this incredible power, because it's a very powerful ability that Eida has, the clairvoyance, but also just the ability to make everyone fall in love with her, basically. But it means she can never properly experience what people actually loving her feels like. And that's what she actually wants, which I really like as a character, in that she isn't just this kind of robotic character who just sees everything and then everyone likes her. Especially this last sequence here, where we get into the idea of she finds Boruto and Kawaki kind of thrilling prospects because her powers theoretically won't work on them. And she really wants to like see if people can come to like her without her ability playing a factor. And that's kind of interesting to me. So, they address the idea that, like, Bug hasn't really shown that he's just crazy for Eida, but it's like, no, he's been around Eida long enough to where, like, he just hides it well because he doesn't talk that much and so on. Code obviously figures out at this point as well, oh, this is why Boro didn't destroy you when he was told to by Jigen, because Boro was also entranced by you, basically. Um, and she says, though he was also rather afraid, just like Bug, of my ability, that is. And then he's like, wait. Why does your ability not work on Jigen? And here's where she gets into, there are two exceptions to her ability. Blood relatives to Eida herself, it doesn't work on. And Otsutsuki's, it doesn't work on. So that's kind of interesting in that they go on to sort of now explain that the Otsutsuki aspect obviously works on Jigen, but is going to work on... it also won't work on Kawaki and Boruto because they've made a big point of pointing out that their bodies are basically turning into Otsutsuki as part of the Otsutsukification process. So her ability won't work on those two, or will only partially work because they're partial Otsutsuki. I don't know how that technical point is going to go. But either way, that's what they're pointing out. The blood relative aspect is an interesting one because I suppose this is where we're maybe going to be able to maybe do some things to figure out who is who with regards to their relationship to Amado, in that when she is in the same room as Amado, if Amado is not captivated by her, then that would be proof that they're blood related. And the same applies to pretty much, like, other characters that we go on to meet, in that who else is there that theoretically is a blood relative of hers? In that, why would they bring up that point unless it is going to play a role in something going forward? It's the Chekhov's gun thing. Why draw attention to something unless it means something? So there's that, because again, it's people. The speculation is Delta or Eida, and there's obviously the potential as well that, like, wait, who is his daughter's? Who's the mother of the daughter? Like, could both of them be involved? And so that maybe puts some value on if Eida and Delta meet up. And again, she said her ability works on women as well. So what goes on there? I'm not really sure. We'll have to wait and see, because obviously it's hard to, I suppose, put basically how old she is, because she kind of makes a bit of a joke about it. And with them all being augmented, you don't know exactly how old any of them are, really. But, yeah, so, she actually asks Kawaki specifically about, like, oh, Kawaki's Otsutsuki, isn't he? And he's like, he's incomplete, he had a car mark. And she notes that, Shiki died by falling for Kawaki's ploy. And she says, when I saw that, my heart fluttered. It was thrilling. I hadn't felt like that in a long time. And he just immediately latches onto it, like, oh, you're right. Your ability may not work on Kawaki. You'd be able to have a normal romance with him. He could be your shining prince. So he seems to catch on to this idea that she actually wants to have a romance, but only with someone where she knows her abilities don't factor in at all. So that's a kind of fun thing. So it's like, oh, you're starting to get it. And he points out that, what about Boruto? He's also undergoing karmic Otsutsukification. So he's plenty eligible to be your prince too. And she says, Boruto, right, he's cute and dreamy too, but what about your objectives? Don't you need a 10-tails father to cultivate the divine tree? And he's like, are you sure about that? You be down one of your precious princes. No worries. Despite my appearances, I'm monogamous. So she only wants one person. So, you choose, basically, Code, which one you want to sacrifice for your divine tree. I'm happy once one of them is left. And Bug is like, it's almost like a human trafficking transaction. They're both crazy pieces of work. So she notes that the Kage are conferring right now. They're searching for you in order to stop your plan. I can see and hear all. You'll never be caught. And he's like, nice, you're the best. I was right to trust you. Well then, in salute to each other's goals, shall we have a toast? Nice to meet you. Likewise, Code. I'm counting on you. So they are now on the same terms. They're going to be working together now. Next chapter, May 20th. It's an interesting chapter, like I said, because I do like Eida as a character. I think she manages to stand out with her, unique motivation, which they manage to get to, fairly quickly, while still presenting like some interesting concepts for like, okay, when she meets Boruto, when she meets Kawaki, they are going to be quite interesting dynamics, because she's kind of looking for love in a story where her encounters with those characters are not going to be romantic in nature. So how did those sort of situations actually happen? It'll be interesting to see if she can keep up this very cool persona that she seems to have around someone, or does she maybe change a little bit when she's around someone where her abilities sort of don't work on. Because obviously she seems really confident in terms of being able to control the situation when she knows she's around people where my ability has already worked on them. She knows that Code and Bug are both captivated by her, but how's that going to work around Kawaki and Boruto, who are pretty sort of like strong-willed and won't just immediately bow down before her in a way. So there's some fun interactions I think ahead of us, and it's just the question really is, and I think perhaps the maybe issue with what the chapter did or did not accomplish is that they didn't really make any plans. That this was a character introduction for Eida, but the conclusion is just that Eida's on Code's side now. But can you please say like the next sentence? Like, what are you actually planning to do from here? In that, because he has Eida on his side now, he's not going to get caught straight away. But also, the chapter got across that he isn't going to attack the village himself either. So that to me suggests we're calming things down and building up for the next big moment. We're potentially going to have the time skip. Boruto and Co are going to need to have time to train. We're going to need to have time to see potentially how the drugs affect Boruto if he takes them. We're going to have to see how Kawaki and Boruto go about, potentially learning more about the karma mark or what decision Boruto makes, that sort of thing. In that, I liked the Amado Naruto scene because it teased Amado more, and the more and more we have chapters with Amado, the more and more interesting he becomes in terms of when are we going to get his backstory. That suddenly becomes this really, really important thing. Just because, the whole thing with his daughter, the fact that he has played such an important role in Kara, but also he has technical skills beyond anything else. So what is the situation there? So it's quite an interesting kind of one overall, just to see where they go. In that, like, again, Delta, because of the daughter mention, sort of begins to sort of pop up again in the discussions. He shut down Delta. He has a specific code word he can use to just shut down Delta. That obviously a lot of people, based on the way what the line was, it maybe gave the impression that that's sort of something like a father would say to a daughter. When will she come back into play? Those type of things. And then we know again that there are other cyborgs out there that are just as powerful as Eida. Are they going to find the other one or two or whatever? That would be pretty cool, I think. That would be a cool thing just to kind of finish off with the time skip of like Eida and Code are maybe the main two characters, and then they have like two other supporting characters with them, and it's just this like team of four to go up against, like, I suppose roughly our team of four in a bit. That seems pretty nice. But again, what the chapter didn't do was tell us what Code and Eida plan to do immediately next. It didn't tell us what Boruto is doing next, what the training is going to be, and it didn't really even clarify what the result of the Kage meeting is, outside of just he's given information to the other villages. So again, a character, some nice little moments, but in terms of properly advancing the plot, a chapter where they really actually didn't really advance the plot. That's, I think, more of the frustrating aspect of this. Because again, even a lot of the scenes like the Gaara scene talking to Naruto, it's like we knew something like that was on the table, so that scene doesn't quite have the impact in this chapter. And again, it's just another case of like a lot of the Kage meeting was just recapping information. So, a very interesting chapter. It's probably not one of the absolute best chapters of Boruto we ever had, but it's also not a bad chapter. It's just they chose what they wanted to focus on, and they did it. They did it well. But they probably could have fit in a few other little things in this chapter. There's definitely space where if they wanted to have this be a bit more information packed, they could have done it. But you know, they have a time here. They're in a kind of between arc sort of a moment here. You know, they're taking their time before they build up to the next big thing. Which obviously, if they are planning for the time skip, that is going to have to sort of require sort of full character redesigns for like basically most of the characters, aging up certain characters, and then a lot of the younger characters are going to have like full redesigns. So that's a lot to plan. It's one thing to just have to do the next chapter with the designs you already have in place. It's another thing to have to also design like each character is going to look completely different now, and that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'll be having another discussion video on this chapter about 10 or so days before the next chapter comes out, so probably May 10th or so. So look out for that as we sort of build up towards speculating ahead of chapter 58. But in the comments, let me know what your thoughts were on this chapter. How did you like the introduction of Eida as a character, and just overall, how did you enjoy this chapter? Do you sort of agree with me that it maybe didn't use its page count as effectively as it could have, but it did what it did well, or what? Let me know. But that's been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.